I never planned on staying in Clear Falls longer than a few months. It was one of those small highway towns that existed purely out of stubbornness, a blinking dot between Dallas and Amarillo, where gas was cheap and the nights stretched on forever. After my father passed, I dropped out of community college, drifted west for a while, and eventually landed at a rundown place called the Hillcrest Motel. I started on the night shift because nobody else wanted it. The pay was lousy, but the owner, an older guy named Vince Tucker, didn't ask many questions. I liked that. Vince lived in an apartment behind the building, which meant most nights I had the lobby to myself. My duties were simple: keep the coffee pot full, check in the occasional traveler, and make sure nobody trashed the rooms. The place had seen better decades. The carpet smelled faintly of mildew, the neon vacancy sign flickered like a dying pulse, and the surveillance system was a relic from the early 2000s, 4 black and white monitors stacked in the corner of the front desk. But I didn't mind the quiet. In fact, I craved it. There was a calmness to the nights, a rhythm in the hum of the soda machine and the distant buzz of highway traffic. I'd been there almost a year when the rain started. It wasn't the usual spring drizzle. This was the kind of relentless downpour that drowns all other sounds. Vince had gone home early, muttering something about a leak in his ceiling. I brewed another pot of coffee, flipped through a worn paperback, and tried not to think about how empty the building felt. That's when the bell rang. 3:17 a.m. The clock above the desk ticked too loud. I glanced at the glass lobby door and saw him, a man standing outside in the rain, motionless except for the drops streaming down his face. He wore a dark coat, soaked through, and no hat. When I buzzed the door open, he stepped inside without a word. "Rough night," I said, forcing a chuckle. "You looking for a room?" He nodded once. His voice, when it came, was flat. "One night." He had no luggage, no phone, no wallet, no ID, just a stack of crisp $100 bills, folded neatly in his hand. When I touched them, they felt warm, like they'd been pressed against a heating vent. "Cash only, huh?" I said. "Yes." I hesitated but took the money. It wasn't against policy, technically. He signed the register. "Mr. Gray," in careful handwriting, and I slid the key for room 9. Across the counter. He didn't thank me, just turned and walked down the hall, his wet shoes squeaking faintly on the linoleum. I watched him disappear around the corner. 5 minutes later, curiosity made me glance at the security monitor. The camera covering the hallway flickered, then steadied. He was still there, standing at the far end of the hall, facing the wall. He didn't move, didn't open his door, just stood there. At first I figured he might be drunk or just gathering himself. Long drives can make you weird. But when 10 minutes passed and he still hadn't moved, I started to feel uneasy. The camera feed looked grainy, the light over room 9 flickering. I leaned closer, tapping the monitor like that would help. The man's shoulders rose and fell slowly, but he stayed perfectly still. I picked up the lobby phone and called Vince. Straight to voicemail. I cursed under my breath, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. The rain outside beat against the roof in heavy waves. The air felt colder than it should have. "Sir?" I called out. "Everything okay?" No answer. The hallway stretched out in front of me, humming with the soft buzz of fluorescent lights. Water dripped somewhere near the vending machine. When I reached the corner, my heart thudded once, hard. The hall was empty. Room 9's door was closed. No footprints, no damp trail. I turned the handle. It opened easily. Inside, the room looked untouched. The bed was made, sheets crisp and clean. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. On the dresser sat the Aikido, right where I'd expected after checkout. I backed out slowly, more confused than scared. Back in the lobby, I checked the monitor again. Nothing. The hallway was still. When I flipped open the register to double-check his info, the name Mr. Gray was gone. All that remained beside the date was a faint, wet handprint, 5 smudged fingers pressed into the paper. The next morning, Vince looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're telling me some guy checked in, didn't use the room, disappeared, and erased his name from the logbook?" "That's what I'm saying." "Maybe you nodded off and dreamed it." "I wasn't asleep, Vince. Check the footage." He sighed, lumbered behind the counter, and started scrubbing through the old DVR system. We watched the grainy recording together, the rain slashing across the lobby windows, me handing over the key, the man's soaked coat dripping onto the floor. Then static. The feed jumped to a later timestamp, 3:30 a.m., hallway empty. Vince frowned. "Hard drive must have glitched." "Or something else," I muttered. "Listen, you've been working nights too long. Take tomorrow off, clear your head." I didn't argue. I spent the day trying not to think about it, but the image of that man facing the wall wouldn't leave my head. There was something intentional about it. Not confusion, not drunkenness. Like he was listening for something only he could hear. The next night, the rain came again. Same hour, same heavy rhythm. I sat behind the desk staring at the monitors, half hoping he'd return, half praying he wouldn't. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the bell rang. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the door. Nobody there. The automatic door sensor blinked red once and went dark. On the counter beside me, the lobby register fluttered open on its own, pages ruffling until they stopped on last night's entry. The faint handprint was darker now. Fresh. Wet. By the third night, I'd convinced myself I was losing it. Still, I came in. Routine can be a kind of safety. Around midnight, Vince came by with coffee. "You look like hell, kid. Still thinking about that ghost guest of yours?" I tried to laugh. "Just a weird couple of nights." He studied me for a moment, then said something that made my skin crawl. "You know room 9's got history, right?" I blinked. "What kind of history?" Vince hesitated. "Back when my old man ran this place, there was a guy, a traveling salesman. Checked in during a thunderstorm. Never checked out. They found him 2 days later sitting against the wall in room 9. Heart attack, they said. He was facing the corner, like he didn't want to be seen." My mouth went dry. "When was this?" "Early 70s. He sipped his coffee. "Nobody ever stays there long. I don't rent it out unless we're full." "But you gave me the key." He frowned. "No, I didn't. You were the only one here." That night I pulled the room 9 key from the drawer where I'd placed it. The brass tag was colder than ice. I should have quit. I should have left town like I'd planned months ago. But curiosity has a way of swallowing fear whole. At 3 a.m., the storm rolled in again, wind rattling the windows. I stood in the lobby staring down the hallway that led to room 9. Then, faintly, came the sound of footsteps. Wet, deliberate, moving toward me. I turned on the hall lights. Nothing. But the cameras showed him, just for a second, standing exactly where he'd been that first night, facing the wall. "Mr. Gray!" I shouted. The lights flickered. When they steadied, the hallway was empty. Only the smell of rain lingered. I went to room 9 one last time. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the room looked newer somehow, like it belonged to another decade. On the bed sat the register open to a blank page. Without thinking, I picked up the pen. Before I could stop myself, I was writing a name that wasn't mine. When I looked down, the ink bled into water, letters dissolving into a faint handprint. The rain stopped. I left the Hillcrest Motel before sunrise, drove until the highway turned purple with dawn. I never went back, and I never took another night job. But sometimes, when storms roll across the plains, I still hear the echo of a bell at 3:17 a.m., and the soft rustle of pages turning in the dark. Fear often begins where curiosity refuses to stop. Some doors stay closed for a reason, and not every mystery demands an answer. Peace comes not from knowing what we saw in the dark, but from accepting that some nights we're better off letting the rain keep its secrets. People think working as a 911 operator makes you immune to fear. It doesn't. You just get used to hearing it. My name's Evan Price. 32 years old, born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. For the last 9 years, I've been the voice on the other end of the line when someone's world falls apart. 911, what's your emergency? I've said that phrase more times than I can count. It becomes muscle memory, like breathing or blinking. You learn to flatten your tone, keep your heart out of it. You're the calm in someone else's chaos. I wasn't always that way. When I started, I took every call personally. A crash, a fire, a kid choking. It all stuck with me. I used to go home and sit in silence, trying to shake the voices out of my head. My wife, Laura, used to tease me for it. She'd say, "You talk to strangers for 12 hours straight and then come home and forget how to talk to me." She wasn't wrong. Back then, the graveyard shift didn't bother me. The city at night felt alive, sirens echoing down the freeway, the orange streetlights reflecting off wet asphalt. Laura hated it, though. She said it was killing me, keeping me disconnected. I told her it was just work, that someone had to do it. I didn't realize how much I'd already started disappearing. The night everything changed, I'd been working a double shift. The calls were steady, drunk drivers, domestic arguments, the usual. My headset felt glued to my skin. Around 2:14 a.m., the board went quiet. That kind of silence doesn't last long in this job. I was sipping cold coffee when a call blinked onto my screen. Private residence, Glendale District. I took a breath. 911, what's your emergency? A woman's voice whispering, "Someone's in my house." Her breathing was sharp, broken. I could hear the creak of floorboards, the soft thud of footsteps not her own. My training kicked in automatically. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated. "Laura." Something about the way she said it made my chest tighten. "Okay, Laura. Are you in a room you can lock?" "I'm in the closet. Please, he's..." The line cracked with static, then silence. "Laura," I said, "stay with me." No response. When a call drops, you log it, flag it for dispatch, and move on. You don't have time to dwell. There's always another emergency waiting. But that night, something about her voice got under my skin. I flagged the address, sent units, and stared at the blank screen until the next call came through. Same number. I froze. 911, what's your emergency? This time it was a man's voice. Low, trembling. My wife. She attacked me. "Please, I need help." In the background I heard a muffled cry. The same voice as before, the woman whispering. My stomach twisted. "Sir, what's your name?" He didn't answer right away. Then quietly he said, "Evan." I blinked. "Can you repeat that?" "Evan Price, please hurry." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Sir, did you say..." The line erupted into chaos. Screams, a crash, then silence. The call cut off. I sat there for a long time, headset still on, listening to the hum of the line. My supervisor, Kelly, leaned over the partition. "You good, Price?" I forced a nod. "Bad domestic call." She sighed. "Aren't they all?" I didn't tell her the address that popped up on my screen. Didn't tell her it was mine. I didn't sleep after my shift. Couldn't. When the sun came up, I drove to my house out of pure impulse, a place I hadn't stepped foot in for months. The front yard was overgrown, the porch paint peeling. My key still worked, though it felt wrong turning in the lock. The air inside was stale, cold, like it had been holding its breath. The living room looked frozen in time. The same beige couch, the same family photos on the wall. One of them caught my eye. Me and Laura on our wedding day, smiling like the world couldn't touch us. My hand shook as I went to the kitchen. The floor still bore the faint outline of something scrubbed too hard, a dark stain that never completely went away. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the 911 system on the secure app. The call logs were there, time-stamped, recorded, archived. I played the first one back. "Someone's in my house," the woman whispered. I turned up the volume. Her breathing, her voice. It wasn't just familiar. It was identical to Laura's. Then the second call. "My wife attacked me, please help." My own voice. The recording ended with a sharp gasp, a sound that echoed in my skull until it became unbearable. That was the night I killed her. It wasn't murder, not in the way people think. It was an argument gone wrong. Months of resentment, exhaustion, and late shifts boiling over. She'd threatened to leave. I told her she wouldn't. We both said things we shouldn't have. Then there was a sound, a shove, a fall, and the world cracked open. When I called 911 that night, I wasn't the calm, collected operator. I was just a man sobbing into the phone, begging someone to save the woman I'd broken. I'd replayed that night so many times, the details blurred. After the investigation, I took a leave, told the department I'd be back once I got my head straight. But I never came back. I couldn't face the silence. The calls I took now weren't real. They were memories. Looping through the old recordings I'd saved, tricking myself into believing I was still doing my job. Every night I sat in that dispatch chair, headset on, listening to voices that didn't exist anymore. I wasn't saving anyone, I was talking to ghosts. The night it finally broke, the console lights flickered like dying stars. My headset crackled, the system rebooting on its own. Then, her voice. "Evan?" My throat tightened. "Laura? You can stop now," she whispered. "You don't have to keep calling." I pressed the mic close. "I didn't mean to." "I know." Her voice softened. "But you can't stay here forever." The line filled with static. For a second I thought I heard my own breathing echoing back, but it was quieter now. Lighter. When the screen finally went black, I took off the headset. For the first time in months I heard the real silence of the room. No hum, no recordings, no phantom calls. I turned in my badge the next morning. Kelly didn't ask questions. She just nodded, like she understood. Some nights I still wake up hearing the phone ring, but I don't answer. Some ghosts don't want saving. They just want to be remembered. Guilt is the cruelest echo. It repeats until you choose to forgive yourself. We can't rewrite the calls we've already made, but we can choose when to hang up. Healing begins the moment we stop trying to save the past and start answering the present. I never expected hosting the graveyard shift at WQRS, a small-town radio station tucked in the heart of my hometown, to be thrilling. After college, I needed work, and nights were the only hours they could offer someone inexperienced. The first month felt like a long, quiet meditation punctuated only by the hum of the control board, the faint static of dead air, and my own voice narrating weather reports, song intros, and occasional PSA reminders about lost pets. The station was a single-story brick building, modest and worn, surrounded by parking lots that echoed every footstep I made. Inside, the studio smelled of old carpet, coffee, and the faint tang of electronics. The control room was a small glass booth with a view of the DJ desk, cassette racks, and the dim glow of blinking equipment. I liked it. It was safe, predictable. I could sip cheap coffee, scroll my phone, and occasionally hum along to the songs I queued up. The only complication was the phone lines. Callers were rare, especially after midnight. When someone did call, it was usually to request a song, complain about static, or ask what time the news would air. Easy, manageable. And then, around 2:13 a.m. on an unusually quiet Tuesday, the lines lit up. All of them. Every single line on the console started flashing, the red lights stabbing against the dim room. I froze, my coffee sloshing in its styrofoam cup. I hadn't announced a call-in segment. I answered the first line. Silence. Then, my own voice. The faint recording of me reading yesterday's weather report played back, slightly warped, like it had been slowed and whispered over itself. I dropped the receiver. My hands shook. Before I could react, another line rang. I picked it up, voice trembling, and heard a whisper. "Don't go to the window." I laughed nervously, trying to mask the tremor in my chest. "Okay, funny," I muttered. "Prank call, very funny." But something inside me tightened. Fear, that slow, creeping dread, spread along my spine. I glanced toward the studio window. The glass reflected the dim glow of the control board, and for a moment I thought I saw someone pressed against the outside. Completely still. The reflection showed only a shadowy figure. I turned toward the window, heart hammering, and nothing. The parking lot was empty. I tried to calm myself. Maybe a trick of the reflection, maybe fatigue. But then my mic, which I thought I had muted, came alive. The whisper returned. Too late. The rest of the night was a haze of terror and denial. Every time I tried to focus on the controls, my eyes darted back to the studio window. I called the building's maintenance line. No answer. The street outside remained empty, save for the occasional streetlight flicker. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was feedback from the console, a ghost in the wiring, maybe a prank by a coworker. But even those explanations felt thin against the raw unease curling in my gut. I replayed the weather recording on the computer. The voice was mine, yes, but subtly off. The pitch was lower, the rhythm slightly lagged, and between words, I thought I could hear a faint echo, like someone breathing behind me. Hours passed slowly. I barely touched the playlists. My coffee went cold. The blinking lights on the phone lines tormented me, each one a potential portal to the same whisper. Don't go to the window. I tried talking out loud to remind myself I wasn't alone. Mark, you're fine, you're safe. The station's empty. It's just lines and wires. Just a recording. My own voice sounded weak, almost distant. Then came the knocking. Soft, deliberate, against the studio window. My heart skipped. I stayed frozen in my chair, eyes fixed on the reflection. The figure wasn't moving. I couldn't see a face. Just dark, still, and pressing closer. I picked up a flashlight from under the desk. Every step toward the window was careful, deliberate. I shone it outside. Empty. Nothing. The parking lot stretched in muted shadows. No cars, no people. And yet, when I turned back to the control board, the lights on the phone lines flared again. The whisper. Too late. I realized I wasn't imagining the sound. It was real. It came through the equipment, echoing as if the station itself had become a speaker for someone, or something, that knew my every movement. I decided to investigate. I dug into the station's archives late that morning, contacting the owner and looking up old reports. WQRS had been around for decades. In the early 80s, the station had an accident. The overnight DJ had reportedly vanished during a night shift. No body was ever found, and the calls that came in that night remained a mystery. Something about that story stuck. The whispers, the lines flashing, the distorted recording, they mirrored that old case. Could it be a technical glitch tied to old wiring? Or had the station absorbed some trace of that night into the equipment itself? I called in a friend, Chris, who worked in broadcast maintenance. He came in around noon, looked at the board, tapped a few buttons. Nothing unusual here, he said. Old lines, old equipment, yeah, but nothing that would make the phone ring on its own or play recordings. You might just be tired, Mark. I wanted to believe him, but the whispers stayed in my head. The memory of that figure pressed against the window refused to leave. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of someone or something, biding its time outside, reflected in glass, but never fully seen. I went home for a few days, but my sleep was shallow, haunted by imagined reflections, whispered warnings, and static hiss. I kept thinking about that night, the exact words, Too late. Too late for what? 2 nights later, I returned to the station, determined to confront it. I arrived at 11 p.m., brought extra lights, checked every line, tested the microphones. Everything appeared normal. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the lines lit up again. My stomach dropped. I answered the first line. Silence. Another and another. Then, through the static, the whisper came, "Don't go to the window." I gritted my teeth, approached the glass. I held the flashlight steady, shone it on the empty parking lot. Nothing. But then the reflection appeared again behind me. Not outside this time, but inside, as though I were seeing a shadow of myself. I spun. Empty booth. I turned back, the figure mirrored perfectly on the console's glass, pressed against the reflection, watching. I felt a cold rush of fear, but also resolve. I realized what it wanted. Attention, reaction, fear. I took a deep breath, picked up the mic, and said slowly, "I see you. I'm not afraid." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the lights on the phone lines went dark. The static cleared. The whisper never came again. After that night, the station returned to its quiet rhythm. The lines rarely lit up. No whispers through the mic, no reflection pressing against glass. I still feel the memory of that hour, the phone lights, the distorted recording, the cold shadow behind me. I kept working the graveyard shift, but I approached it differently. Lights brighter, playlists planned, doors checked carefully, and always keeping a steady voice ready. I learned that fear could be a tool, but also a trap. Ignoring it or letting it control you leaves you powerless. Confronting it directly, even when irrational, gives clarity. I never found out who or what tried to reach me that night, but I carry the lesson forward. Fear can hide in ordinary places, in patterns we think are mundane. And sometimes the scariest things aren't outside threats. They're reflections of our own hesitation, our own uncertainty. Fear is only as powerful as the control we give it. Shadows, whispers, and unknown forces may haunt our lives, but acknowledging them, confronting them with courage, and refusing to let them dictate our actions transforms fear into clarity. Often, the only way to break a cycle of terror is to face it head-on, with a steady hand and an unshaken voice. I'd been working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station outside Austin for almost 6 months. It wasn't glamorous, just neon lights, the occasional smell of burnt coffee, and the hum of trucks rolling down the highway. But it paid rent. Most nights, it was quiet enough to read or zone out behind the counter. Other nights, weird things happened. You get used to the oddities after a while, the teenagers trying to buy cigarettes with fake IDs, truckers napping in their rigs, the occasional drunk wandering the pumps. But some nights made you question everything. Jay, my coworker, was 22, always grinning like the world owed him a joke. That particular Tuesday, he had texted me, "Bet you won't notice if I switch your till." I laughed, assuming he was kidding. He was always trying to prank me, always pushing the boundaries. I shrugged it off and went about my shift. Midnight came and went, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The quiet was comfortable, until my phone buzzed. "You shouldn't have lied about the till." I froze. I knew Jay had a sense of humor, but this was different. I chuckled nervously, texting back, "Okay, very funny, who is this?" No reply. Then another message. "You think you can hide anything? I know about your car." My stomach dropped. That was personal. Too personal. Jay wasn't usually that creative. I laughed nervously and called him. "Dude, stop messing with me. Who is this?" "Not me," he said, confusion clear in his voice. "I haven't touched my phone all night." My laugh faltered. The messages got more detailed. "Your mother is worried about you, that scar on your neck. Don't think I didn't notice." I stared at the screen. That scar was from an accident when I was 16. How would anyone know? I looked up at the CCTV monitors. The pumps were empty, or so I thought. Then I saw him, a man, walking slowly among the pumps, wearing my old hoodie, the one I'd thrown away weeks ago. Heart pounding, I stepped outside. "Hey," I called. The man froze, raised his hand as if in greeting, and disappeared behind the dumpsters. I ran after him, but he was gone. Inside, I locked the doors. I couldn't explain it. Jay insisted it was a prank, but my gut told me otherwise. That night I couldn't sleep, my eyes flicking to every shadow outside the window, waiting for that familiar hoodie to appear again. The next morning, I barely made it through my shift. My hands shook as I counted the till, every beep of the register sounding like a warning. I couldn't stop thinking about the messages and, more importantly, how someone could know such private details about me. "I see everything you do." That was the next message. I froze, realizing I hadn't typed it. My phone was sitting on the counter, screen unlocked. I looked around the empty store, the neon sign humming overhead. My pulse was racing. Jay came in for the morning shift. "You look like hell," he said, leaning against the counter. "Still scared of your little prank?" "This isn't a prank, Jay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Someone's watching me, using my number." He laughed nervously. "Okay, man. I swear, I didn't do anything. Look, why don't we check the CCTV together?" We watched the feed. The man in the hoodie was gone, but every once in a while, a shadow flickered across the camera, a shape familiar, almost me. I felt a chill. Then another message. "I know where you sleep." I dropped the phone. "Jay, it's not funny anymore." He shook his head. "I'm serious. I didn't touch your phone. I have no idea who's doing this." I went home that day feeling hunted. Every step toward my apartment weighed down with paranoia. The hoodie, the messages, the knowledge. Everything felt like it was stitched into my life without my consent. The next night, I arrived for my shift early. The fog was rolling in from the highway, softening the neon lights into a dull glow. I tried to focus on routine, checking the pumps, tidying the shelves, counting cigarettes. But my eyes kept darting to the lot. Around 3 a.m., I caught a movement on the CCTV. The hoodie, my old hoodie, slowly pacing among the pumps. My stomach sank. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped outside. The cold air bit at my cheeks and my heart hammered. "Hey!" I shouted. No response. I moved toward the pumps, flashlight cutting across the fog. A figure waved, but before I could get a closer look, it vanished behind the dumpsters. I ran to the spot. Nothing. No footprints. No sign of anyone. My hands were shaking as I went back inside. I slammed the doors, locked them, and stared at the monitors. "You're running out of time." The message was on my phone. My own number. I hadn't typed it. My stomach churned. Panic bubbled in my chest. The following morning, the police arrived. I told them everything. The messages, the hoodie, the CCTV. They searched the store and eventually found it. A small burner phone taped under the counter. The text history? Every single message had been sent from my own number. I had been sending them to myself. What? How is that possible? I asked the officer, feeling like I was losing my mind. "It's called a spoofed number," he said. "Someone can make it look like a message comes from you, but this is advanced, and someone knew you intimately." I nodded numbly. I realized then that all the fear, all the dread, the hoodie, the vanishing figure, it had been manufactured to feel personal. But by whom? And why? Jay shook his head. "I didn't touch your phone, I swear. I didn't even know about this until you told me." I didn't argue. At that moment, reality itself felt unreliable. I didn't know who to trust. Not my eyes, not my phone, not even my own memory. After that, I never fully recovered the sense of normalcy. I installed new locks, changed my routines, even stopped using my phone at work. Every shift felt like a test. One false move, one misplaced glance, and the past could repeat itself. I still see shadows sometimes, a familiar hoodie flitting across the lot, but I don't chase it anymore. I've learned that fear can be manufactured, that paranoia can be exploited, and that reality is sometimes stranger than fiction. The gas station still hums at night. Trucks pull in, teenagers sneak smokes, and the neon sign flickers like nothing ever happened. But I carry that night with me. A reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't strangers. They're reflections of yourself. Fear can be manipulated, and the mind is powerful enough to turn its own memories against itself. Always question what feels real, but never forget that sometimes the greatest threats come not from outside, but from within. Awareness, caution, and trust in your instincts are your strongest defenses. I never planned to work graveyard security at a hospital, but life had a way of nudging me into strange jobs when nothing else seemed steady. A few months after college, I found myself in Greensboro, North Carolina, trying to keep my bills paid and my head above water. The regional hospital near my apartment offered a night shift security position, mostly because no one else wanted to sit alone in a building where lights hummed too bright and hallways smelled faintly of antiseptic mixed with something that didn't belong, like flowers that had gone rotten. The first few weeks were easy, almost boring. I would make rounds, check doors, verify alarms, and occasionally escort a late-night visitor or nurse through the empty wings. The psychiatric ward in particular was eerie after midnight. Most nights it stayed empty, lights off, a faint hum from the vending machines, a distant TV somewhere in the building. It felt like stepping into a vacuum. I liked it, though. Quiet suited me. I could think without interruptions, sip my lukewarm coffee, and scroll through news feeds until dawn. I told myself it was safe. Hospitals were supposed to be orderly places. Rules were followed. Doors stayed locked. Alarms worked. Until the night of the elevator. It started with the flickering of a camera feed in the basement. Around 2:40 a.m., I noticed something odd. One of the cameras covering the elevator lobby in the old psychiatric wing sputtered like static electricity, and then a figure appeared on screen, a woman in a hospital gown, standing motionless in front of the elevator doors. At first I thought it was a glitch, a reflection, a trick of the grainy feed, but the section was locked for renovations. No staff should have been there. I called it in over the radio. "Maintenance?" I said, voice echoing against the empty halls. "You have someone in the psychiatric wing elevator? It's supposed to be locked." Static was the only reply. Curiosity and caution nudged me down the stairs. The hallway smelled sharp, antiseptic biting at the back of my throat. Beneath it, there was a faint sweetness like old flowers someone had left in a vase months ago. My boots echoed against the linoleum. I flicked the flashlight over the elevator doors. Nothing. Empty. Then, the elevator dinged. Behind me. I spun. The doors slid open slowly. And there she was, smiling faintly, holding a name tag. My name. My heart hammered. My first thought was that someone had a sense of humor, or worse, meant to scare me. "Hey, whoa, you're not supposed to be here," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman didn't respond. She only smiled, tilting her head like she was studying me. Her gown was frayed at the edges, and the hospital ID glinted in the harsh fluorescent light. My name stared back at me. Maybe you got the wrong floor?" I said, stepping closer, hand hovering near my radio. She didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at me, and a cold weight settled in my stomach. I backed up, keeping the flashlight on her. "I'm security. You need to leave. Now." Still nothing. Just that faint, almost patient smile. "Look, I don't want to call this in as a prank or anything," I stammered, my voice quivering more than I liked. "But if you don't leave, I will." She finally moved. Just one step. The elevator door closed behind her slowly, the ding echoing like a bell in the empty basement. I heard nothing else. No footsteps, no door sliding, just the soft hum of the building's air system. I radioed the front desk. "Did you see this on the camera?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. The static response on the other end made my stomach churn. Camera feed? It went black a few seconds ago. Nothing here. Nothing. I stayed in the basement for the next 30 minutes, flashlight scanning every corner, checking locked doors, testing alarms. No one. Nothing. The only sound was my own breathing and the faint hum of the emergency lights. I went back to the monitor room and replayed the feed. My stomach dropped. The video cut right as she turned toward the camera, holding my name tag. That wasn't possible. Not in a locked, empty building. Somewhere deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it. But I also knew no one would believe me. Night shift security was already low on credibility. People assumed you were tired, imagining things. The next few nights were a tense quiet. Every time I passed the basement, my flashlight lingered on the elevator doors longer than necessary. Every creak of the pipes made my stomach twist. Then I started noticing small things. Doors I was certain I had locked were slightly ajar. Chairs shifted just enough to feel deliberate. The faint scent of sweet flowers lingering longer than it should have. My coworkers noticed I was jumpy, asked if I was sleeping okay. I lied. I didn't want anyone thinking I was losing it. I began documenting everything in a notebook. Times, places, what I smelled, what I saw. By the end of the week, it became a pattern. The woman appeared on camera at nearly the same time each night. Always in the same spot. Always holding a name tag with mine. Always gone when I arrived. I started talking to myself aloud while checking the elevators, a habit I hated but couldn't stop. It's just someone messing with the cameras, I muttered. Someone with a uniform. Someone who knows the layout. But deep down I knew. This wasn't ordinary. This wasn't a prank. One night I called in maintenance while she appeared again on camera. Someone's in the psychiatric wing, elevator lobby. Can you check? Sir, the technician said, voice flat. That area is locked. Renovation's been ongoing for 2 weeks. No one's authorized to be there. I swallowed hard. My radio slipped from my sweaty hand. Then, how? No answer. Only static. I had to see her. I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't happening. That night I prepared. Flashlight, radio, keys, even a small baton for my security kit. I told myself I'd handle it calmly, rationally, professionally. As I descended into the basement, my heart thumping, I rehearsed what I would say. Leave. Now. I'm security. You need to stop. The elevator dinged before I reached it. The doors slid open. She was there. Same smile. Same hospital gown. Same name tag. Only now, her eyes were different. Harder. Sharper. Like she had been waiting for me. You need to leave, I said again, holding the flashlight tight. I know, she whispered. Her voice was soft but carried through the basement, resonating in a way that made the hair on my arms stand. I just want you to see me. I swallowed. See you? I don't understand. She tilted her head. I'm part of you. Part you ignore, part you're afraid to face. I only appear when you're alone, when you think no one's watching. It didn't make sense. My rational mind screamed, she's a ghost or hallucination, or someone's pranking you. I stopped. She stepped closer. The flashlight flickered, the smell of old flowers stronger. Then she vanished. This time I heard the elevator close behind me. No ding, no hum, nothing. Just silence. Days passed. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time I walked the halls, every time I checked cameras, every time I thought about the smell of sweet flowers in antiseptic air, I felt her presence. I realized I had two choices. Keep running from what I didn't understand, or accept it and move forward. Night shift security had already taught me that fear was part of the job, but letting it control me meant losing myself. I started documenting my experiences, writing down patterns, smells, times, movements, anything that might help explain it rationally. Eventually, I stopped fearing her. Instead, I began thinking about what she represented. The parts of life and work we ignore. The fears that sit in the background until something forces us to confront them. I never saw her again. The hospital basement returned to its empty, antiseptic quiet. But I carry the memory of that night with me. Reminder that fear, like the unknown, is always waiting. How we respond matters. Fear is a signal, not a sentence. It guides us toward caution, yes, but it can also teach resilience, self-awareness, and the strength to face the unknown. Ignoring it or letting it control us leads to stagnation. Confronting it, even when the answers are unclear, empowers us to navigate the shadows of our lives with courage and clarity. I had been working overnight security at Lockridge Storage for nearly 6 months, long enough to know the patterns and quirks of the property. The complex sat on the outskirts of town, bordered by empty lots and the faint hum of Interstate 47. It wasn't glamorous work, just long rows of metal units, chipped paint, rusting padlocks, and the flicker of sodium lamps that struggled to illuminate the asphalt below. Most nights were uneventful, the kind of uneventful that lets your mind drift, letting your thoughts wander down roads you'd never explore in daylight. My shift ran from 11:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. I had a small, cramped office at the front gate, equipped with a monitor showing multiple camera feeds. The cameras were old, the picture grainy, but enough to see if someone tried sneaking in without a keycard. A radio sat on the desk, the only lifeline to dispatch, though most nights I barely used it. A small fridge hummed in the corner. Occasionally, I'd make coffee that tasted like burnt wire, and the faint smell would cling to my uniform until morning. The main rule was simple: no one on the property after midnight without clearance. Occasionally, a renter would be late and I'd watch, verify their identity, and wave them through. Mostly, though, it was silent. Even the wind seemed cautious, careful not to disturb the quiet. It was that quiet that made everything unsettling. There's a certain kind of tension in empty places, the way shadows cling to corners, how metal surfaces hum with their own energy, how every creak and clatter feels louder than it should. And on that Friday, I learned exactly why. Around 1:45 a.m., my routine was interrupted. One of the motion sensors on the far end of the lot triggered a light on the monitor. I leaned forward, squinting at the grainy image. A figure was moving between the units. A tall person, hoodie up, face hidden. They didn't run, didn't walk casually. They moved with a deliberate, measured pace, like they were performing some ritual only they understood. I reached for my radio. Dispatch, check-in, motion sensor trip, row F, possible trespasser. The crackling reply was calm, almost bored. Copy that. Keep an eye. Any ID? I grabbed my flashlight, radio, and keys, and drove slowly toward row F. The beams of my headlights carved pale rectangles across the lot. The wind had picked up, rattling metal doors and sending loose pieces of chain clinking. By the time I reached the row, it was empty. My flashlight swept left and right, catching nothing but shadows and dust. "Hello?" I called, voice echoing slightly. Nothing. The only sound was the faint clink of a chain on one of the doors swinging in the wind. I crouched, shining my flashlight on the padlock. It was different. Fresh scratches, like metal scraping metal, and the shackle was slightly ajar, though I could swear I had checked it earlier. I pressed the shackle. Firm. Locked. Nothing had been disturbed yet. A chill ran up my spine. I radioed dispatch. Row F, padlock appears. Tampered with. No sign of anyone. Over the next hour, my nerves settled just enough for me to question what I'd seen. Maybe a stray animal had triggered the sensor. Maybe someone tried to break in but got scared off. I walked the rows again, flashlight in hand, checking doors, listening for any unusual sound. That's when I noticed them. Footprints in the dust. Fresh. Human-sized. Leading to the far corner of the lot. My stomach clenched. The footprints circled around several units and then stopped. There was no continuation into the street, no vehicle, no escape route, only empty asphalt and my echoing flashlight beam. I crouched and traced one print with my boot. The impression was deep, like someone carrying weight. I radioed dispatch again. Footprints found at row G circle pattern. No exit visible. Standing by. The reply was short. You sure you're not tired, security? It's late. I ignored the tone. Tired or not, I wasn't imagining this. There was something deliberate about the tracks, like whoever made them wanted me to find them. And then I heard it. A whisper. Almost beneath the wind. Soft. Distinct. Don't. My pulse spiked. I spun, flashlight slicing the darkness. Nothing. The lot was empty. By now, sweat was rolling down my neck. I moved toward the office to review camera footage, hoping it would rationalize things. The feed from row F, static, grainy. Then just for a second, a shadow flickered between units. Hoodie, tall. The figure didn't run. It just paused, turned, and vanished. I did one last round, checking every unit in row F and G. Nothing. Doors intact, chains clinking in the wind. The lot was silent except for the hum of the main gate motor. Back in the office, I reviewed the monitor again. That's when I noticed the anomaly. The feed wasn't showing real-time movement. I could see my flashlight reflection bouncing across the unit doors, but the shadow figure wasn't following patterns of light like a normal trespasser would. It seemed aware of the cameras. Waiting. I checked the office window. Empty lot. Dust and faint tire tracks from an earlier delivery. I told myself to calm down. Tired. Wind. Imagination, I muttered. Then the padlock caught my eye again. Row F, Unit 12. Fresh scratches. Shackle slightly open. My flashlight beam caught the glint. I walked over slowly, radioing dispatch one last time. Unit 12, tampered padlock. I'm checking it. The second I touched it, a cold gust of wind swept past, rattling doors and chains. Footsteps behind me. I spun. Empty. My radio crackled, static whispering in my ear. Too late. I didn't wait. I ran back to the office, locked the door, and sat there shaking until sunrise, listening to the hum of the gate motor. By morning, the lot seemed normal again. No footprints. Padlock fully secured. Cameras showing nothing but empty asphalt. Dispatch called it a prank or a hallucination induced by exhaustion. I didn't argue, but I knew what I saw. The deliberate movement, the whisper, the padlock. I couldn't explain it rationally. Some nights, empty places carry their own weight. They hold memory, intention, and presence that doesn't belong to any living thing. I stayed on the night shift for a few more months, never again leaving the office without a flashlight and keeping the radio close. I learned to trust my instincts, to respect the quiet, and never assume that empty meant safe. The storage lot is just metal and asphalt. But after midnight, it can feel like it remembers you, and sometimes that memory is watching. Even the most ordinary places can harbor unseen dangers. Awareness, caution, and respect for the unknown are essential. Complacency and routine or disbelief in subtle signs can turn ordinary nights into moments that change your understanding of safety forever. Trust your instincts. They are often the first line of defense against what you cannot see. When I took the overnight janitor job downtown, I thought it would be perfect. Quiet, steady pay, and no one breathing down my neck. The building was a 10-story office complex, worn but functional, with a mix of small businesses. An insurance company occupied the upper floors, and a law firm had offices on 3 levels. Most of the other spaces were rented out sporadically, though the 8th floor had been empty since the previous tenant went under. My schedule started at 10 p.m. I would unlock the doors, grab my mop, vacuum, and cleaning supplies and start my rounds. The building was mostly silent at night, save for the occasional hum of a heater or the faint echo of my footsteps across polished tiles. At first it was peaceful, almost meditative. I would mop the floors in patterns that only I understood, empty trash bins, and make mental notes of any maintenance issues. I liked the solitude. It was rare in my life outside of work. But after about a month, I noticed something odd. The 8th floor, which was supposed to be vacant, felt different. I didn't catch it at first, just a slight chill in the air, and a faint scent of coffee that lingered when I passed the elevator. One night, as I was finishing up the 7th floor hallway, I decided to take the elevator up to the 8th floor to double-check that the lights were off and the doors locked. The doors opened to an empty floor. Clean, sterile. The kind of place where the smell of old carpet mingled with faint ozone from the AC. But near the reception area, a stack of folders lay scattered on the floor, papers fluttering slightly as if someone had just dropped them. My heart skipped a beat, though I told myself it was probably security or maintenance. I gathered the folders and stacked them neatly, muttering to myself about how messy people could be. The next night, the papers were gone, but something new had appeared. The computer monitors at the reception desk were on, glowing in the dark, displaying a single line of text. "Do not clean this floor after midnight." I laughed nervously. Maybe it was a leftover prank from the old tenant, I reasoned. But I remembered asking the cleaning supervisor later, who insisted that no one else had a key. My pulse still thumped in my ears whenever I passed that floor, though I pretended to ignore it. A week later, the oddity escalated. I was mopping the 2nd floor hallway when I heard it. Faint, rhythmic typing. It wasn't constant but deliberate, slow and measured. I froze, listening. The sound came from the 8th floor. I checked my watch, 12:30 a.m., and tried to dismiss it as imagination. But curiosity, and maybe the lingering tension from the messages, made me take the elevator up. The floor was empty. No one, no movement, no sign of recent activity except the faint hum of the computers still on standby. The air was cold enough to see my breath, even though the thermostat read 72. I felt my skin prickle. That's when I noticed the office door slightly ajar. Inside, a coffee mug steamed faintly on a desk, and next to it lay a name badge. R. Delaney. The name nagged at me. Later, I asked the building manager about it. He stared at me for a long moment before saying, "Delaney died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Right at his desk on 8. After that night, I refused to go up there. I never touched the 8th floor again. But sometimes around 12:15 a.m., when the elevators are locked on the 1st floor, the indicator for 8 time flickers, like someone up there pressed the button themselves. By the 2nd month, the 8th floor had become a constant presence in my thoughts. Every night I tried to avoid it, keeping my rounds strictly to the floors with active tenants. But the air near the elevator shaft seemed different when I passed it. There was a faint hum, almost like a low vibration, that I couldn't identify. One night I was wiping down the 7th floor bathroom sinks when I heard it again. The typing. Slow, deliberate. My stomach tightened, but I decided to investigate. I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. Nothing. The floor was empty, sterile, silent. I walked down the hallway, shining my flashlight across the desks. No one. But the temperature dropped sharply. My breath hung in front of me, and I realized I could see it even though the HVAC system was on. That's when I noticed a desk chair slowly spinning, not in a push or gust of air, but on its own. I froze. The computer screen at the reception desk flickered, and I thought I saw movement. Something pale, sitting, hunched, typing with speed and precision. I blinked, and it vanished. Only the flickering monitor remained. I called my supervisor the next morning. "Have you had any reports of activity on 8?" I asked. "No," he said. "We've never touched that floor. It's been empty since Delaney left." "Why?" I didn't tell him about the typing, the cold, or the spinning chair. I didn't want anyone thinking I was losing it. But I knew something was there, lingering in the empty space. The pattern continued. Each night the typing grew longer, sometimes hours at a time. I never saw the figure again, only the signs. The warm coffee mug, the name badge, the flickering lights. Every time I passed the elevators, I felt eyes on me, though no one was there. Curiosity eventually got the better of me. One night, armed with my flashlight and a portable radio, I resolved to investigate the 8th floor fully. I rode the elevator up, heart pounding, flashlight cutting across the silent hallways. The temperature dropped again, breath fogging in front of me. The reception desk was exactly as before. The coffee mug was gone, but the name badge remained. R. Delaney. I picked it up, spinning it in my hands. "Mr. Delaney?" I called, my voice shaking. No response, only the echo of my own voice. I moved further down the hallway. Desks, chairs, papers untouched for years. Then at the end, a faint glow came from a partially open door. I approached slowly. The typing sound started again, steady, deliberate. I pressed the door open fully. Empty. But on the computer, a new message flashed. "Why do you disturb me?" My pulse raced. I backed up, nearly dropping my flashlight. I ran down the hall, feeling an invisible weight pressing on me. I pressed the elevator button and got out as fast as I could, doors closing just in time. From that night on, I never stepped onto the 8th floor again. I asked the building manager if there had been any renovations or strange occurrences. He shook his head. No one has been up there for 2 years, except a cleaning crew when we changed floors. They didn't report anything unusual. I wondered if it was Delaney's spirit, lingering, or something else entirely. My mind tried to rationalize it. Old wiring, drafts, shadows. But the typing, the name badge, the computer messages were too specific, too personal. One night, standing near the elevators, I realized I could feel the building's history pressing in. The decades of work, lives spent in cubicles, the energy of people long gone. Maybe some of that energy never left, lingering in the stale air and flickering lights. I decided it wasn't about me. It was about presence, memory left in the building's bones, refusing to be forgotten. I stopped looking up at the 8th floor entirely. I did my rounds, mopped, vacuumed, emptied trash, and never ventured near the elevators after midnight. Occasionally, I'd see the indicator flicker. 8 oinged. A brief, silent reminder that someone or something remained. Over time, I stopped feeling fear and started feeling respect. Delaney, or whatever presence lingered, wasn't malicious, only insistent. A quiet insistence that his space was remembered. I accepted that some things are beyond explanation. Buildings have memories and people leave imprints, sometimes so strong that even the living can feel them. I still hear the faint echo of typing in my mind, and sometimes when the elevators are locked, I imagine someone pressing the button for the 8th floor. I let them. I don't interfere anymore. Some spaces carry the weight of history, and some presences linger long after life ends. Respect what came before you. Acknowledge the unseen and understand that not every mystery is meant to be solved. Sometimes simply bearing witness is enough. Before I quit, I worked nights as an EMT in a rural county that most maps barely bothered to label. It wasn't glamorous, mostly overdoses, drunk crashes, and the occasional heart attack. But you learned to keep your head when everything else fell apart. Nights had a rhythm, the hum of the ambulance engine, the distant barking of dogs, the way the highway lights stretched thin like veins across the desert plains. I was partnered with Rick, an older medic who'd been on the job since the 90s. He had that worn-down look people get when they've seen too much. Lines etched into his face, eyes always scanning the darkness for danger, hands steady but with a faint tremor. I liked him because he didn't sugarcoat things, and he taught me how to move efficiently without letting fear slow me down. The night of the Old Willow Road call started like any other. We were in the station when dispatch clicked over with a welfare check. A neighbor had heard screaming inside an abandoned farmhouse. I glanced at Rick. "Sounds like a prank," I said. "Or worse," he replied, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs plastered everywhere. He stubbed it out in the metal ashtray, flicking the butt onto the concrete floor. Either way we go. We drove in silence, the ambulance headlights cutting through miles of overgrown cornfields and weeds that scratched against the chassis like fingertips. Old Willow Road had no streetlights. The trees and brush leaned in as if the darkness itself was alive, and the farmhouse appeared suddenly, like it had grown out of the shadows. Windows were boarded, the mailbox rusted through, and weeds climbed higher than the porch railing. The front door was ajar, creaking with every gust of wind. Rick grabbed the flashlight from the dash. "I'll take point," he said, his voice low. I nodded, gripping my EMT bag tight. 911. If anyone's in here, we're medics, I called as we stepped inside. The air was thick, stale, and carried the scent of rot and mildew. The floorboards groaned under our weight, echoing in the empty hallways. The walls were scarred with deep scratches, long jagged lines clawed into the plaster. My stomach turned. Jesus, what did this place see? Rick didn't answer. He moved methodically, checking doors and corners. Then we heard it, muffled sobbing from upstairs. "Up there," Rick whispered, nodding toward the staircase. I followed him, the flashlight beam bouncing off peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. At the top was a small room, a single chair facing the corner. A woman sat there, rocking slightly, whispering the same phrase over and over. He said help was coming. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, and bruises marked her arms. She didn't flinch when we entered. "Ma'am, I'm Rick. I'm here to help," he said gently. She didn't respond, just repeated the line. I pulled out my stethoscope and began checking her vitals, trying to focus on something measurable, something real. That's when Rick froze, staring at the window. "There's someone outside," he said. I swung the flashlight toward the yard. Nothing. Not a shadow, not a figure. Just the wind, bending the tall grass like waves on a black ocean. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. We loaded her onto the stretcher and into the ambulance. The farmhouse faded behind us, swallowed by the night. But she started screaming halfway down the road. "Turn around, you left him behind." I gritted my teeth. "Who, ma'am? Who did we leave?" "The man. The one who told me you'd come." Rick didn't say a word the rest of the drive. I kept glancing at him, but he just stared straight ahead, pale and tight-lipped. We dropped her at the county hospital's ER. Doctors and nurses swarmed, checking her injuries, talking in rapid-fire medical jargon. She didn't stop shaking, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was still following us. Back at the station, Rick sat in silence, rubbing his face with both hands. I grabbed a coffee, staring out at the dark lot. "Rick, you okay?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "I've been on nights for 27 years, he said slowly. "I've seen suicides, car wrecks, overdoses, drownings, but I've never felt that." "What do you mean?" "That farmhouse. That girl. I swear I saw someone in the yard. Someone watching us." He shook his head. "And the scratches inside. Nothing alive makes marks like that." I tried to argue, but the memory of the woman rocking in that corner, whispering her mantra, made me quiet. For the next few nights, I kept replaying it in my head. The shadows at the window, the whispers, the way Rick went silent in the ambulance. Sleep was a blur of half-remembered nightmares, wind scratching at my bedroom window like claws. 2 nights later, I went back to Old Willow Road alone. I wanted to see the farmhouse to rationalize what I'd seen. The weeds had grown taller. The boarded windows were more weathered. When I pushed the front door, the creak echoed like a scream. The scratches were still there, and the air, that same stale, oppressive air. I left quickly, but I could have sworn I heard soft sobbing follow me to the road. Rick quit that week. I didn't see him for months after. He just walked in, handed in his uniform, and left, saying only, "Some things are better left buried." I thought he was exaggerating at first. Then months later, I ran into Officer Daniels. Whoa, who had been called to the scene that night. "You remember that farmhouse?" he asked, his tone casual but with a trace of unease. "Yes, and why?" "Burned down the next day. Arson, no suspects." He shook his head. "Only weird thing they found, melted metal badge in the ashes. Old paramedics badge from the 90s, no idea whose." I froze. The timing, the badge, the whispers. Rick's warnings, the woman, the figure in the yard, it all collided in my mind. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I pictured the farmhouse burning, the shadows stretching across the floorboards, the whisper of, "He said help was coming." I tried to put it out of my mind. Night shifts came and went. I worked other calls, overdoses, crashes, heart attacks. But every so often a call would come in that reminded me of Old Willow Road, an abandoned house, a frightened voice, a strange silence in the line before the next dispatcher picked up. One night I went back, not to respond but just to drive past, see if the land had swallowed it whole. The farmhouse was gone, charred timber, blackened soil. The weeds were starting to grow over the burnt foundation, but as I drove slowly by, I could swear I heard the whispering again. He said help was coming. I slammed on the brakes. Nothing. Just the wind. For the first time, I understood Rick. Some things aren't just scary because they're unknown. They linger because they touch something inside you that already knows fear. I didn't go back to Old Willow Road again. I requested a transfer, then eventually left EMS entirely. The fear stayed with me, though. Even when I tried to sleep, the whisper followed me into the dark corners of my bedroom. I still think about her sometimes. That small figure in the chair, whispering a mantra she didn't understand. I wonder who he was, the one she said was coming. Was it real? Or just the imagination of a terrified mind trapped in a decaying farmhouse? Some nights I drive past empty fields and pretend I don't hear it, pretending the wind isn't forming words. But deep down, I know some places keep the memories of pain and desperation. They keep them because we don't know how to let them go. I never saw Rick again. I hope he's found peace. As for me, I'm still learning to let go of the road, the farmhouse, and the whispers that followed us home. Sometimes the scariest things aren't monsters. They're the echoes of suffering left behind, the reminders of our own limits, and the lives we can't always save. Compassion is essential, but so is understanding that some traumas must be acknowledged, faced, and then left behind. We carry the weight of others' pain, but we also owe ourselves the chance to step out of the shadows. I used to love the quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft whir of the automated dispensing cabinets, and the rhythmic beep of IV pumps. Night shifts at a small-town hospital pharmacy suited me perfectly. I was 29, a pharmacist for 7 years, and there was something comforting about knowing the chaos of the hospital would settle around midnight while I worked in my own bubble. The coffee I brewed in the back room was always too strong, the kind that kept my hands steady and my mind sharp. It hadn't always been this way. I grew up in a house where medication meant safety. My father was diabetic, my mother meticulous. Pills lined the kitchen counter like soldiers on parade. I learned names and doses before I could even spell them. But my father's death changed everything. He had overdosed on morphine after an accident, and no one could tell me if it was a mistake, negligence, or intentional. I buried the guilt in school, in pharmacy rotations, in late-night lab exams. I became careful, methodical, maybe even obsessive, because mistakes weren't just mistakes to me, they were lethal. Working in the hospital, I thrived on control. Each order verified, each dose checked and double-checked. My colleagues called me by-the-book Lila because I followed protocols religiously. But lately, the protocols were starting to blur. It began with the medication logs. Morphine orders appeared under my name, doses higher than recommended, and sometimes for patients already marked as deceased. At first I thought it was a clerical error. Someone mistyped the name, a system glitch. But the errors kept multiplying. One night I was restocking the refrigerated meds when I heard it. A faint, uneven knocking from the storage freezer. "Hello?" I called, expecting a delivery or maybe a maintenance worker. The hospital was supposed to be empty. No one answered. The knocking continued. I opened the freezer door, half expecting cold air and nothing more. Inside, lined neatly on the shelves, were pill bottles. Their labels were clear, precise. Names, dosages, dates. My stomach churned when I saw them. One bottle's label matched the date of my father's overdose. My father's face flashed in my mind, the way his hands shook, the resigned look in his eyes. I stepped back, heart hammering. My reflection in the glass door seemed off. It moved slower than I did, like I was dragging through molasses while my image lingered. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long shadows. I whispered his name, just a quiet, broken sound. And then I heard it. Soft, low voices. Whispers of patients I didn't remember treating, murmuring their thanks, their fear, their anger. I realized I was speaking to the freezer door, imagining conversations that weren't happening. My pulse accelerated, and I pressed my palms to my face, trying to calm the panic. Before I could take a step back, the pharmacy door opened. "Lila, who are you talking to?" My supervisor's voice was sharp, concerned. I froze, realizing how ridiculous it must have sounded. There was no one there. No patients, no coworkers, just me and the cold hum of the freezer. I swallowed hard, trying to compose myself. I was just checking the stock," I lied. My hands trembled slightly. "Nothing to worry about." She gave me a skeptical glance and left, and I was alone again, staring at the pill bottles and my distorted reflection. Something had shifted. The quiet of the night which I had once cherished now felt like a trap. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't in the pharmacy at all. Not really. The next night felt different. The hospital was always quiet, but now the silence pressed against me like a hand on my shoulder. I checked the electronic medication records. The morphine orders were still there, under my name. Patient names, doses, timestamps. I had no memory of filling them, but the logs insisted. My hands shook as I touched the keyboard, scanning for mistakes. "Maybe I'm losing it," I whispered to myself, trying to rationalize it. But logic faltered when I heard the tapping again, faint and rhythmic, coming from the refrigerated section. My mind conjured shapes in the shadows. Patients I'd never met, eyes wide with fear, mouths moving silently. I walked to the freezer, heart pounding, and saw more bottles. One after another, labels with dates spanning years, some familiar, some entirely foreign. I reached for one, my fingers trembling, and felt a sharp chill crawl up my arm. I remembered faces from my training days, the ones who had slipped through my hands, the mistakes I had tried to bury. "Lila," a whisper seemed to echo, soft and sorrowful. I spun around. Nothing. Only the freezer humming, the cold air brushing my neck. I pressed my forehead against the glass, seeing my reflection. My own eyes looked hollow, tired, haunted. The next moment I heard the phone buzz, a message from an unknown number. "Do you remember?" My breath caught. I hadn't sent it. I hadn't seen the number before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, paralyzed. The line between reality and imagination blurred further when I thought I saw my father's hand press against the inside of the freezer door. I staggered back. My thoughts raced. Mistakes. Patience. Morphine. Dead. Alive. Was I going mad? Or had I already crossed some line I couldn't remember? The blinking cursor on the computer taunted me, reminding me that someone, or something, was holding me accountable for errors that weren't recorded in my memory. It was around 3 a.m. when the hallucinations, or memories, intensified. I watched my reflection in the freezer door again. This time, it moved differently than I did. Slower, dragging, deliberate. I raised a hand. The reflection hesitated. I blinked. Its eyes seemed deeper, older, accusing. I stepped back, heart hammering. The voices returned, louder now. Whispers overlapping. Incoherent. You killed us. You killed him. My father's face appeared again, twisted in anger and disappointment. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. When the supervisor arrived, I spoke to her absent-mindedly, not realizing I was addressing a reflection and not a person. I didn't mean to, I said. Her eyes widened. Lila? The freezer door? She gestured. Panic surged through me. I had been talking to cold glass, conjuring voices from my guilt, trapped in a narrative I couldn't escape. I realized in that instant that the hospital wasn't real. Not tonight, not ever. My night shift, my pharmacy, the orders, they were a construct, a looping memory created to confront my guilt. It took days for me to understand what was happening. I was in a psychiatric recovery ward. Every night as part of treatment, I relived my final shift over and over. The logs, the pill bottles, the freezer, they were all designed to force me to face the consequences of the mistake that had triggered my breakdown. I learned to differentiate reality from simulation, to ground myself in the present when the hallucinations became overwhelming. Each night, the whispers grew quieter as I acknowledged my grief and guilt rather than hiding from it. Some nights I still saw my father's face, or a pill bottle with a past date. But I could now separate what was real from what was my mind's replaying of trauma. It was exhausting, terrifying, but necessary. Months passed, and I grew stronger. I learned that guilt doesn't disappear, but you can live with it. The repeating night shift eventually became a tool rather than a prison. I started keeping journals, recording every hallucination, every whisper, and every memory, which helped me untangle the threads of trauma from reality. The hospital nights still haunt me in flashes, but they no longer control me. I've come to accept that mistakes can define a moment, but not the entirety of a life. Recovery isn't about erasing guilt. It's about acknowledging it, learning from it, and moving forward. I now visit the recovery ward's meditation room nightly, not to relive the trauma, but to honor it. The freezer, the logs, the whispers, they are symbols of lessons learned, not tools of punishment. Guilt can distort reality, trapping the mind in loops of fear and regret. Healing comes not from forgetting mistakes, but from confronting them, accepting responsibility, and finding a way to live with the past without letting it define your future. I've been a highway patrol officer for nearly 10 years, which means I've spent more nights alone on asphalt than in my own bed. Route 46 is one of those roads you learn to respect fast. Long stretches of tarmac cutting through the countryside, dotted with the occasional diner or gas station, and at night swallowed whole by fog. I started that night like any other. Coffee in a travel mug, cruiser lights off, radio crackling quietly in the background. The hours stretch in a monotony you can't describe until you've sat behind the wheel with nothing but your thoughts and the hum of the engine. My mind wanders between the mundane, traffic reports, upcoming shift changes, and the private, my ex-wife's text from earlier in the week, the way my daughter refuses to talk about school over the phone. Dispatch came through around 11:45 p.m. Stranded vehicle reported on Route 46, mile marker 12, requesting unit to respond. I acknowledged, sliding the cruiser into gear. The fog had already thickened, wrapping around the headlights in ribbons of gray. There's a part of highway work you don't often see dramatized, the intimacy with the road at night, the feeling that you're the only thing awake in a world that has otherwise fallen silent. You learn to pay attention to every shadow, every flicker of movement. By the time I reached mile marker 12, I could barely see the road ahead. A lone car sat on the shoulder, engine running, lights cutting a weak path through the mist. I slowed, pulled alongside, and stepped out into the damp air. No one inside. The driver's seat was empty. The doors were unlocked. My first instinct was caution, hand hovering over the holster. "Hello?" I called into the fog. The hum of the engine was the only answer. That's when I noticed the trunk was slightly ajar, I hesitated, fingers tightening around the flashlight handle. Something about the angle seemed wrong. I pulled it open. Inside was a police badge and a dash cam, coated in fresh blood. My stomach dropped. I picked up the camera, fingers trembling, and pressed play on the small screen. What I saw made my hands go cold. It was me, my voice, calm but firm, calling someone to pull over. My weapon drawn. Hours earlier, supposedly. But I didn't remember any of it. Every word I said, every move I made, I could not recall. "Dispatch, I need confirmation of my last checkpoint," I said into the radio, trying to steady my voice. The radio squawked back, but the voice on the other end sounded distant, panicked even. "Daniel, why haven't you checked in for 2 days?" Static cut the feed, and the fog seemed to thicken, swallowing the cruiser like it had teeth. The engine hummed beneath me, but the world outside was nothing but white gray. A shiver ran down my spine. This was no ordinary call. This was something else. Something I didn't understand. I backed the car slowly, eyes scanning the foggy distance. Something wasn't right. Like the road itself had changed, warped around me. But when I tried to call it in, the radio went dead. No voice, just the hiss of static. Hours later, or maybe it was minutes, time felt slippery. The fog thinned. I looked around, and for the first time in my life, Route 46 didn't look familiar. And yet the mile marker told me I hadn't moved. I was trapped somewhere between memory and reality. Morning came, or maybe it didn't, but light crept through the fog, washing the world in dull gray. I wasn't in the cruiser anymore. The car that had been abandoned the night before was still there, engine cold, door ajar. I approached it cautiously. Inside, the dash cam lay on the passenger seat, blinking. I picked it up, hands shaking. The moment I pressed play, I heard my voice. "Suspect neutralized. Do not approach." I froze. The words echoed in my mind. I didn't say them. I didn't do any of it. And yet, it was me on the footage, moving with the same ease, same authority, the same cold professionalism I had honed over 10 years. The hairs on my neck stood on end. This isn't real," I whispered. But my own voice sounded distant, detached, like it was coming from a stranger. Dispatch confirmed later that week, after a flurry of calls and verifications. Daniel Reeves, my own name, had died on that exact stretch of Route 46 7 days ago. The body had been found near the abandoned cruiser, same mile marker. Heart failure, stroke. No one could say exactly why. I remember the first moment I felt something beyond disbelief. Fear, yes, but also a kind of resignation. Something had kept me tethered here, somewhere between life and death, and I had been unaware the entire time. The more I watched the footage, the more fragmented memories emerged. Not my memories exactly. These were echoes. A pullover, a flashlight cutting across the rearview mirror, my weapon drawn, the suspect, someone, some shadowy figure I didn't know, and yet the hands, the stance, the authority, I knew it intimately. I started driving the route repeatedly, hoping for clarity. Fog rolled in thicker each time, muting my surroundings. I talked to myself, recording everything. What happened here? Why am I seeing this? Who am I? The questions had no answers. Dispatch, friends, even family. Everyone tried to reach me, but I was gone in some ways. I existed in the footage, in the echoes, but not in reality anymore. I realized that my mind had become a bridge, a phantom trapped in a loop of my own life. It wasn't just me anymore. On the camera, in the fog, a figure appeared. Shadowed, faceless, yet somehow familiar. Every attempt to get close during my patrols failed. It vanished when I turned my head. I realized then that the suspect wasn't just in the footage. The suspect had become part of the fog itself, part of the event that had claimed me. I tried to communicate, tried to reach someone, Nothing worked. No one could see him, no one could hear him, and the recordings were my only tether. And still, the voice played back. Suspect neutralized. Do not approach. Weeks passed, or maybe days. Time blurred. I learned to stop fighting. I stopped trying to reason with reality and started recording, documenting. Route 46, mile marker 12, the abandoned cruiser, the dash cam, my voice, the fog. I realized there was a lesson in this, something I had ignored in life. The road is long, time is fragile, and sometimes death doesn't end a story, it traps it in limbo. My job, my routine, my control over life, over danger, over justice, it was all fragile. And for the first time I understood that some things are beyond comprehension. I no longer try to escape. I watch, I record, I remember. And in the fog, I whisper to myself, respect life, respect the unknown, and never assume the road is safe. Life is fragile, and time is fleeting. The choices we make, the paths we take, and the authority we wield can have consequences far beyond our understanding. Respect the unknown, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the fragility of existence. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but honored. I never imagined I'd spend my 20s pushing a mop through dimly lit corridors of a psychiatric hospital, dodging patients with insomnia or delusions. But after a series of dead-end jobs, night shifts at Brookwell Regional Hospital seemed simple enough. Low pay, few questions asked, and almost no one to supervise me past midnight. Most nights the hospital was quiet. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the soft whir of the ventilation system, and the occasional beep from a distant monitor became my companions. I learned to time my rounds, starting in the east wing, moving methodically to the west, mopping spillages, checking that doors were locked and avoiding the wandering patients. They were mostly harmless, lost in their own sleepless worlds, muttering to themselves or dragging slippers across the floor. Eye contact was a dangerous invitation. I learned that quickly. At first it was routine. I'd push the mop bucket across the linoleum, hear my footsteps echo, and whistle low to myself to stay awake. The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic, mixed with lingering hints of whatever flowers someone left behind in the lobby days ago. I liked the rhythm, the control. Cleaning was simple. It had rules. Wet the floor, mop in rows, empty the trash. No surprises. But things started happening. Small things I tried to rationalize. A patient's slippers outside the storage closet when none of the patients were supposed to leave their rooms. Wet footprints appearing in the east wing, starting at a water fountain and disappearing into the wall. At first, I told myself I was tired, imagining patterns where none existed, stress from too many nights alone in the empty corridors. Then came the first thing I couldn't explain. My name, scrawled in what looked like crayon on a padded wall in the quiet therapy wing. I froze. "Who's playing a joke?" I whispered aloud. No reply. The hallway was empty. I scrubbed the letters off quickly, heart thudding in my chest. Later, I started checking the storage room for misplaced items, only to find that small things were subtly shifted. Cleaning supplies I hadn't used in weeks, extra buckets in odd corners. The hospital seemed different, like it was moving around me when I wasn't looking. I shrugged it off, saying it was stress. But a gnawing unease had settled into my stomach, and the fluorescent hum seemed sharper, almost accusing. It happened 3 weeks into my usual routine. I was emptying a cart in the records room, a dusty, rarely accessed area where patient files were stacked haphazardly, when a manila folder slid out from a shelf as if it had been waiting for me. I picked it up. It read, "Mark Harrison, violent episode, hallucinations." I froze, staring at the photograph taped inside. The man in the picture looked like me, or at least a version of me from years ago. The eyes, the square jaw, the same worn expression I saw every morning in the bathroom mirror. My mind reeled. "This isn't possible," I whispered, setting the folder down and checking the nearby shelves. I ran it up to my supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Linda, Hey, this file. I think it might be misplaced. It says Mark Harrison. She cut me off, squinting. I don't know what you mean. There's no Mark Harrison on our staff list. Security, come here, I protested. No, listen, I've been working nights here for... They didn't hear me. Within minutes, 2 security guards were there, questioning me. They didn't recognize my key ring, the uniform I thought I had been wearing, or the cleaning cart I pushed nightly. Sir, where are you from? One asked. We've never seen you, I stammered. What? I've worked here for years. I have keys. I clean the hallways. I know the patients. The men exchanged glances. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. I shook my head, panicking. I ran to the nurse's station only to see my reflection in the mirrored glass. A patient's white gown tied loosely around my shoulders. My own face staring back at me. And behind me, another janitor entering the station, holding a mop, looking confused. You okay? He asked. I couldn't answer. My keys, my clothes, my work, none of it was real. The hospital wasn't my job. I was the patient. It took hours, or maybe minutes. Time felt warped to process what I was seeing. The real janitor was talking to the supervisor, pointing out which hallways needed mopping. I was invisible in my own life, a shadow of someone who never existed in the hospital system. I wandered the corridors, trying doors I knew should open. Locked. Key after key failed. I followed familiar routes, checking closets, mopping spots I'd always cleaned. Nothing responded. The hospital was intact, functional, but it ignored me. I realized I hadn't been cleaning it. I had been living in a delusion built from memory, repetition, and habit. Everything fit. The slippers, the footprints, the scattered supplies, they were reminders my mind had constructed to maintain the illusion. Even the scrawled letters on the padded walls felt like my subconscious marking territory, a way to reassure myself I existed in some organized routine. I passed a therapy room mirror and froze again. The reflection didn't match me anymore. The eyes were hollow, the skin pale. My reflection was waiting, watching, alive in a way I wasn't. I whispered my own name, but no sound came back. The realization hit like a punch. I had been a patient here for years. My mind, twisting trauma and isolation into routines, had created a safety net of night shifts and empty hallways to hide from the reality. Every mop, every floor polished, every corridor walked had been part of a delusion designed to protect me from fear, shame, and abandonment. I tried talking to the staff. I need help, I said to the supervisor. I've been working here. I've been cleaning. They nodded kindly, leading me toward an office. Mark, you're safe. That's the past. You've been receiving treatment here. You're recovering. You're not a staff member. The words were unbearable. My identity shattered into fragments I couldn't grasp. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to insist I had keys, a uniform, a routine. But the files, the reflections, the real janitor, all evidence pointed the opposite. Therapy sessions followed. Days blurred. I learned that my delusion had been coping with a severe episode of schizophrenia. Night shifts, mopping, wandering patients. My mind had rewritten the hospital as my workplace, giving me control where none existed. I began to see the reality of it. Patients I thought were distant strangers were my peers, fellow survivors of their own struggles. Hallways I thought I knew were labyrinths I had walked blindly, my mind painting them as familiar, controllable paths. Acceptance didn't come fast. It came slowly, in small moments of clarity. I stopped pushing the mop. I stopped checking doors. I learned the names of the staff, of the patients, of the therapists who genuinely cared. Every day I confronted the hallucinations that tugged at the corners of my vision. Mirrors no longer reflected delusions. They reflected a man learning to navigate reality. My identity, once warped by fear and routine, began to reassemble. I still feel echoes of those nights, the hum of fluorescent lights, the scent of antiseptic and old flowers, the phantom footprints in the hallways. But I know now that fear and imagination can build entire worlds if left unchecked. And understanding, help, and acceptance are the keys to stepping back into the real one. The mind can create prisons as intricate as any walls or locks. What feels real may be an elaborate illusion, built from fear, trauma, and the need for control. The lesson is this: seek clarity, accept help, and confront the truths we fear. Because only by facing reality can we rebuild ourselves and find freedom from the delusions we cling to. I used to be a cop in Chicago. Not the heroic kind people write about, but the kind that spends long nights staring at reports, arguing with dispatchers, and making mistakes that can't be erased. My name's Leo Torres, 38, and for the past 5 years I've been a night guard at a luxury high-rise on Michigan Avenue. Not exactly the crime-fighting life, but it pays the bills, and it keeps me out of trouble. Or so I tell myself. I got fired from the force under a cloud. There was a case involving a stolen piece of evidence and a missing suspect, a teenager in a red hoodie. The investigation blamed me. Maybe I deserved it. I don't know anymore. I just know that night still plays in my head like a broken film reel. One wrong call, one flash of the gun, and a kid I was supposed to protect ended up dead. Now, I walk the same halls every night, watching monitors, checking cameras, patrolling empty corridors. The building is pristine, modern, gleaming glass and polished marble, but quiet like a mausoleum after 10 p.m. My uniform is black. My only companion's the soft hum of the elevators and the occasional ringing of the security phones. The first time I noticed the oddities, I thought it was my imagination. A shadow flitting down the basement stairs, the faint echo of laughter when no one should have been there. The cameras never showed anyone, but I could feel it, like a weight pressing down behind my chest. That night I'd been on duty for about 4 hours. My eyes were glued to the monitors, checking the lobby, the garage, the rooftop, when I heard it. A scraping noise from the basement camera. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but sharp enough to make me sit up straight. I grabbed my flashlight, my baton, and my key card. The elevator doors opened silently as I pressed the basement button. The hum of machinery died when the doors parted. The basement was darker than it should have been. Deeper shadows pooled in every corner. I stepped out, flashlight cutting through the black, and that's when I heard whispering. Low, soft, almost a hiss. I froze. "Hello?" I called, forcing my voice steady. "Security. Is someone down here?" No answer, just whispering. I took a few more steps. The monitors upstairs flickered, then went blank for a second. When the image returned, I nearly dropped the flashlight. There was someone on the monitor moving down the basement stairs behind me, wearing a security uniform, but I was holding the only key card for that floor. I spun around. Empty. After that night, I started noticing more. Elevator lights flickering, doors stopping at a non-existent 13th floor, the faint smell of cigarettes and rain in hallways that had no ventilation. Sometimes, when I patrolled alone, I'd hear footsteps echoing behind me. When I turned, nothing. But the cameras would catch movement. A figure at the end of a corridor, just out of reach, just out of focus. I tried to tell myself it was stress, or guilt, or the building's acoustics playing tricks on me. But it wasn't. There was something deliberate in the timing, in the whispers that seemed to react to my presence. One night, I confronted the basement again. I called dispatch. "You seeing anything down there?" "No one's reported anything, Leo," came the static reply. I went down anyway, flashlight shaking in my hand. Halfway to the basement landing, I heard it clearly. "Your shift's not over yet." The voice was familiar, soft, and it cut through me. I froze. Red hoodie. The missing boy. I told myself it was a hallucination, a memory twisted by shame. But when I reached the bottom, there were scratch marks on the concrete walls. Fresh. I swear they weren't there before. My heart raced. I didn't stay long. I never stayed long. The security office became a place of obsession. I checked the building logs, the elevator sensors, the maintenance reports. Nothing explained the stops at the 13th floor. Maintenance swore there was no floor, no buttons, no shaft. But the elevator responded, stopping exactly where it should not exist. And every time it did, I heard him, the boy in the red hoodie, whispering, accusing, warning. I stopped talking to anyone about it. People asked about the building, the job, my shift patterns. I lied. I said it was just old wiring, old elevators. It wasn't. One night, the whispering followed me all the way to the rooftop. Wind whipped against the glass barriers, city lights glittering below. I saw the reflection before I realized it wasn't mine, a boy in a red hoodie, standing at the corner watching me. I ran. The rooftop doors slammed shut behind me. I locked them, but I could feel him there, waiting. Sleep became impossible. Dreams were filled with elevators that didn't exist, with the boy laughing and fading into the walls, then reappearing closer. My body was exhausted, my mind trapped in loops of guilt and fear. Every monitor became a window into my past, every corridor a reminder that what I'd done couldn't be erased. Rick, my old partner in the force, would have told me to move on. Maybe I needed to. But the boy's presence was relentless. It was punishment or warning or maybe something I deserved. The night it escalated, I had been on shift for 12 hours. I was weak, delirious. The elevator opened to the 13th floor. Concrete walls, no signage, lights dim and buzzing. A single door at the end of the hall. I walked toward it, compelled, terrified. The whispers were louder now. "Your shift's not over yet." I opened the door. Nothing. Just the air, cold and metallic. Then I saw the outline, a small figure in a red hoodie sitting on the floor looking up at me. I knelt. My hand shook. "I'm sorry," I whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to." He didn't speak. He just stared. And I realized the truth. This wasn't about me catching him or saving him. This was about me acknowledging the failure, the blood on my hands, the life I ended. Hours later, the building owner found me unconscious beside the elevator. My mouth moved, muttering apologies. "I'm sorry," the boy, in the red hoodie. I never returned to that high-rise. My security job ended quietly. People didn't ask questions. Maybe they suspected something. Maybe they didn't care. I moved to a smaller city, trying to keep myself busy, trying to sleep. But every time I hear an elevator hum or footsteps echo in a quiet building, I feel the boy's presence. It isn't malevolent anymore. It's a reminder, a tether to the mistake I can't undo. I've learned to live with it, to accept that some guilt doesn't vanish. Some people we fail don't forgive us, and some mistakes aren't ours to correct. I carry it like a badge, a constant lesson about accountability, about conscience, about human limits. I don't hear him every night anymore, but I never forget. And sometimes, when I see a red hoodie in the city, I pause. Not out of fear, but out of memory, out of respect. We cannot erase the consequences of our mistakes, and guilt left unacknowledged becomes a shadow that follows us. Redemption isn't about undoing the past. It's about facing it, learning from it, and carrying it responsibly, ensuring that even our failures teach us something about conscience, accountability, and humanity. I never planned to work nights at a roadside motel, let alone a shabby one on the outskirts of Fallon, Nevada. The Mirage Motel wasn't fancy. It never asked for ID. Its neon sign flickered like it was giving up, and the carpets had stains that even bleach couldn't erase. I found the job after drifting through half a dozen odd night shifts, each emptier and lonelier than the last. The hours suited me. No one watching, no expectations. Just me, the guest book, and the humming vending machines in the lobby. The night shift was monotonous. Guests arrived occasionally, always whispered, hurried, like they had secrets to keep. I'd log them into the handwritten book, the pages curling at the edges, ink smudged from too many caffeine-stained nights. Most nights I'd sit behind the desk, TV muted, listening to the low hum of neon outside and the occasional creak of the building settling. The routine was comforting, predictable, safe. I liked the solitude. No small talk, no awkward eye contact. I could watch shadows play across the empty parking lot and tell myself it meant nothing. And for a while, it didn't. Until the night she checked in. She stumbled into the lobby, eyes wide, her voice trembling like the cigarette smoke she left behind. "Please, please," she said. "He's after me. My husband. He won't stop." She wore a thin jacket, trembling hands gripping a small bag, like it contained her entire life. I stood, leaning across the counter. "Ma'am, slow down. Can you tell me your name?" She whispered it, almost like she didn't trust the walls not to listen. My fingers hovered over the guest book. "Room's ready, number 12, just lock the door behind you." "Please, don't let him find me," she said. I nodded, heart rate climbing. But then the bell jingled again and a man stepped in. Calm, polite. A suit that looked like it had seen better days, eyes scanning the lobby. "Evening. I'm looking for my wife," he said, voice low and smooth. I froze. Both of them. My mouth went dry. I hesitated. Something about his posture, his calm, sent a chill down my spine. Room 12, I said. He smiled faintly. "Thank you." I watched him walk down the hallway. Seconds later, a shot echoed from the back. Sharp, final. Silence returned. Morning arrived too quickly. The desert sun spilled across the cracked asphalt, highlighting the faded motel sign. I expected police, worried guests, maybe someone calling the station. But nothing stirred. The phone rang. Startled, I picked it up. Silence, then a click. Dead. I stepped into the hallway, empty. Room 12 locked, just as I remembered. The carpet still smelled faintly of cigarettes and cheap air freshener. The faint echo of the shot lingered in my ears. I went back to the desk. The guest book. I flipped it open. Blank. Every page. Clean. Smudges gone. No handwriting. No room numbers. Nothing. My stomach churned. I ran through the lobby again. Empty vending machines. Hum still constant. Shadows of the previous night seemed to stretch longer than before, curling around the edges of the furniture. I called the local police from the desk phone. A young officer answered. I tried to explain. Someone was shot last night. There was a woman, a man. "Sir, no one has checked in here for 3 days," he said. "We came by after a noise complaint. Nothing. Cameras show you alone all night, talking to empty hallways." I dropped the receiver. My mind scrambled. Empty hallways. Blank pages. Alone. I went to the back office, the tiny room with the kitchenette and a small cot. My reflection stared back from the cracked glass of the window. But there was something wrong. My own eyes. Hollow. Older than they should be. Tired in a way that couldn't be explained by sleepless nights. I sat on the cot, pressing my hands into my face. What was happening? The shot. The woman. The man. None of it existed, and yet it felt real. The previous night came back in flashes, her pleading eyes, his calm smile, the shot. And then a thought I tried to push away. I knew that man. The voice. The posture. The suit. No. Impossible. I pulled the guest book toward me. Blank. Every page. I touched the pages slowly, tracing my fingers over them. No ink. Only emptiness. The security camera above the lobby blinked red. I checked the feed. Me, alone. Talking to nothing. No woman, no man. Just me, moving through shadows I created. And then the memory hit. The detail I'd buried. The day it happened. The argument in the cheap motel room. The fear, the rage, the gun. The sound of her body hitting the floor. The rush of panic as I fled. I wasn't the manager, I never had been. I was the husband. The killer. The purgatory wasn't the motel's night shift. It was my own guilt, replaying endlessly, waiting for me to admit it. I tried to leave the office, step outside into the desert sun. The lobby extended before me as usual. The guest book was blank, the vending machines hummed, and there they were again, the shadows I conjured, the echoes of the night I lived over and over. I realized then that nothing would change until I spoke the truth aloud. I had to confess. I had to face the horror I carried. I picked up the phone. My voice trembled. I killed her, my wife, years ago. I ran. I've been living in this motel, this hell, since that night. The phone went dead. Silence returned, but it was lighter somehow. The hum of the vending machines didn't feel menacing anymore. The neon sign flickered, steadying as if acknowledging me. I flipped the guest book again. Still blank, but I understood. This loop, this endless night, was my punishment. Until I owned it, every repeat would feel the same. Days and nights blurred together. The sun rose and fell, the desert winds shifting outside, but inside, the motel remained constant. I accepted my role, not as manager, not as janitor, not as night shift observer, but as the man who had to live with the consequences of his actions. I walked the hallways, spoke into the empty rooms, and admitted over and over, I am guilty. I cannot undo it. The words, repeated aloud, began to dull the endless cycle of fear. Shadows still lingered in corners, reflections in the glass, but I no longer feared them. They were reminders, not threats. I realized that some nights would never end. Some sins would never leave. But acknowledgement, confession, and the willingness to face the past were steps toward understanding. The motel was no longer just a building. It was a mirror of my own conscience. I learned that living with guilt doesn't end with punishment from the world. It ends with confronting it yourself. Every day, every night in the quiet, fluorescent-lit hallways of your own conscience. Guilt is a weight that time cannot erase. No matter how far we run or how we hide, the past has a way of looping back until we face it honestly. Confession and acceptance are not absolution. They are the only path to understanding and peace. Hiding from your actions only prolongs the torment. Owning them is the first step toward freedom, even in self-imposed purgatory. I never thought working at a storage facility would change my life. Maybe I should have known better. I was 27, freshly out of college, and struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment in a city that felt too big to care about me. A friend had mentioned that Eastview Storage was hiring a night attendant, and I figured it couldn't be that bad. Key cards, security cameras, and a couple of patrol rounds. What could go wrong? My first night, I walked through the rows of metal doors, the cold metal under my gloves and the faint smell of dust and motor oil in the air. The facility was empty, except for the occasional tumbleweed of paper caught in the breeze from the nearby highway. I had my little desk set up with a lamp, a monitor for the cameras, and a box of instant coffee. Not glamorous, but it was work, and work meant rent. I was settling into the monotony, scanning the cameras, when I first noticed it. The glow from the monitor showing Unit 42D flickered. It wasn't unusual for cameras to glitch, old wiring, bad signal. But something about it made me pause. The unit's door creaked slightly. I rubbed my eyes, assuming it was fatigue. Probably just the wind, I muttered to myself. Then I saw it. A figure, tall, moving slowly across the row. My heart picked up. I grabbed my radio, ready to alert my supervisor, but as I watched, the figure stopped in front of a Unit 42D and just stood there, motionless. Then it stepped out of frame. "Hello?" I called into the empty yard, my voice sounding small. Nothing. I checked the sensor logs. Nothing triggered. Not a single motion alert. That was impossible. Every time someone entered a unit, the system logged it. And yet the footage was clear. Someone had been there. By morning, I was exhausted, jittery from coffee and lack of sleep. The footage kept replaying in my head. I called the front office, spoke with my manager, and described what I'd seen. "Must be a glitch," she said. Her voice clipped, probably thinking I was overreacting. But I wasn't. I needed answers. I checked the records for Unit 42D, rented 2 months ago by R. Gomez, paid in full. I dialed the number listed on file, expecting a friendly renter. Instead, a groggy woman answered. "Hello?" Her voice was cautious. "Hi, I'm calling from Eastview Storage. I wanted to confirm some activity on Unit 42D. The camera showed someone entering last night, but the motion sensor didn't pick anything up." There was a pause, a long one. Then softly she said, "That's impossible. My brother rented that unit. He passed away last year." I froze. "I'm sorry. What?" I managed. He died last November. R. Gomez is my brother. He isn't alive anymore." The line went silent. I hung up, heart racing. It couldn't be. There had to be an explanation. I returned to the monitor and watched the footage again. Every movement, every shadow, it was exactly what I had seen. The figure paused in front of 42D, turned slightly, and vanished out of frame. Nothing else triggered the sensors. Something about that day changed me. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop replaying the image of that figure. And I couldn't shake the thought. Who, or what, was in 42D? Determined to find answers, I went to the storage facility the next night. My supervisor had called it a coincidence, but I couldn't let it go. I brought a flashlight, a notebook, and a sense of unease that had grown heavy over the past 24 hours. The lot was eerily quiet. I walked slowly down the rows, stopping in front of 42D. The metal door gleamed under the pale security lights. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the lock keypad. Then I noticed it. Faint scratches along the door frame, almost as if someone had tried to enter without a key. I took a deep breath, punched in the code from the records, and pulled the door open. The unit was empty. Nothing inside except old cardboard boxes and dust. No signs of recent activity. No footprints. Nothing. I sighed, tension easing slightly. Probably just someone checking it out and leaving. But even as I said it, I felt a chill crawl along my spine. I turned to leave and thought I heard a soft shuffle behind me. I froze. The sound stopped as soon as it began. I told myself I was imagining things, then started walking faster toward the exit. That night, I couldn't shake the sense that someone, or something, was watching me, not just through the camera, but in the shadows around the units. I decided to return during the day, hoping to catch someone in the act. Eastview was empty, the sun bright over the metal roofs. I walked past 42D slowly, pretending to inspect nearby units. Then I saw it. A man, tall, hunched slightly, walking slowly along the row, his face hidden by a cap, his hands in his pockets. He stopped in front of 42D and stared. Not at me, not at the door, but somewhere in between. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, can I help you?" He turned his head slightly but didn't answer. Just stood there, silent. I took a cautious step closer. "Sir, this unit is private. You're trespassing." He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then walked slowly away, leaving a faint trail of cold air in his wake. I wanted to call after him, ask questions, but something in his presence warned me against it. That night I watched the footage again. The figure from the camera. It matched him. Every movement, every posture. I had seen it before. And yet, the unit had been empty that day when I opened it. I never figured out who or what was at Unit 42D. The cameras never showed him leaving, the sensor never triggered, and the renter's sister insisted it was impossible. I told my manager, showed her the footage, but she shrugged. Policies, paperwork, liability. Nothing to see here. Over time, I stopped checking the cameras obsessively. I learned to accept that some things are beyond understanding. Eastview continued its quiet, mundane nights. I kept my flashlight nearby, my hand over my radio, and my instincts sharpened. I still think about that man sometimes, the way he moved, the silent intensity in his eyes. Maybe he was just someone lost, or maybe he was something else entirely. Either way, the experience taught me something. The world has its secrets, and some of them aren't meant to be solved. Some of them are simply meant to be respected. And every time I pass by a locked storage unit, I pause. I glance at the shadows. I remember that figure. And I remind myself, the world is bigger, stranger, and more mysterious than we give it credit for. Not every mystery has a clear explanation. Sometimes the most important lesson is recognizing our limits, respecting the unknown, and learning to navigate life with caution, curiosity, and empathy for the unseen struggles of others.